And let's go to the phones now, which we have Representative Michelle Bachmann with us. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us.
Paul, good morning. What a privilege to be on KTLK with you this morning.
Oh, absolutely. So good to have you. And you know what? It's amazing because we saw the coalition of about 5 of you during the first CR grow to 54, many of whom said after I spoke to them sort of off the record, off the cuff, they said to me, yeah, you know, a big part of this was that $105 billion that you brought up. You sort of sounded the alarm about. Was that what you were hearing from fellow members who voted against this last CR?
Yes, and the $105.5 billion that was tucked into the Obamacare bill, which, as you recall, no one knew about, no one discussed, the public didn't know about this, and here we are engaged in a battle to cut $61 billion out of the budget, and then we find out that Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, and Harry Reid tucked in over $105 billion into the Obamacare bill without telling anyone. This should be an outrage all across the country by all of your listeners. You just can't do that to people. Spend their money and not tell them that that's what you're going to do. So we saw a huge increase in the number of people that voted no on the CR. And as you know, 3 weeks from now, that continuing resolution will run out. We'll have to find another way to pay for government, and I think that we'll see even larger numbers after that. I think that people will be less likely to support these stopgap measures.
From what you've heard, have the leadership taken a potential, not a shutdown, but a potential CR, a third CR off the table? Is that off the table now, and they're working towards a budget, or is it just everything's on the table?
No, I think everything is on the table. I don't think that any of their options are limited right now, but I think that members of Congress will be going home to their districts, and I think for this upcoming week, and I think they'll be hearing loudly and clearly from people back in their districts that people don't want to see Obamacare funded. That's socialized medicine. People are not in favor of it. This is the highest polling this week of people who want us to get rid of Obamacare. The number has jumped 62%. For a year now, the polling has been consistent. A majority of Americans, not just conservatives, not Republicans, but all Americans, including Democrats and independents, want us to repeal Obamacare. And I think that it jumped even more this last week because we've been talking about it, and we've been talking about the $105 billion. It's definitely probably one of the most unpopular programs that's ever been passed. And just like Nancy Pelosi said, you have to pass the bill to know what's in it. The more the American people know about this bill, the more they beg and plead to do everything they can to bang pots and pans together to get their members of Congress' attention to tell them, please get rid of this program.
Sure. And you know what? I mean, obviously, Congresswoman, the big story that everybody's sort of focusing on, especially in the mainstream media, but I think something that might warrant just a little bit of attention is the fact that there seems to be a separation at this point between the Republican leadership and, you know, those 54 members or so, you know, yourself included, and the conservative base of the Republican Party. People saying, you know what, there clearly is. The leadership keeps going at these what appears to be half measures. I'm sorry, that's what the rest of the country sees as half measures. And now we're continuing to argue. I mean, $6 billion just yesterday that we were able, or that was cut in the last CR. Well, the budget deficit went up $72 billion. So people are saying this is nowhere near what we need to do. Are the Republican leadership tone deaf at this point, or are they just, is there something else going on?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that government is spending money faster than all of us can earn it.
Right.
And it's like we are turbocharged now when it comes to spending. And I think that the Republican leadership gets that. I think they're trying to do everything they can to cut the spending. And also for my colleagues that didn't vote no with me on this bill over Obamacare, that doesn't mean that they don't want to get rid of Obamacare. My colleagues do want to get rid of it. It's just a matter of tactics. My opinion is, I think we have our strongest leverage now. I think we put up the fight now. And I think the longer we wait, the more difficult it will be. I mean, look at our home state of Minnesota. Governor Dayton, in one of his first acts, was to sign an executive order for early implementation of Obamacare. Minnesota is one of the first states to do that. I think that was a real mistake because the Minnesota state budget is already overextended, And to add another 100,000 people onto the rolls of subsidized health care when we simply can't afford it, I think is foolishness. Don't expect money from the federal government to come to Minnesota to pay for this. There's no money there. When you open up the vault here in Washington, D.C., just moths and feathers fly out. There's nothing in there. And so people may have these grand ideas that we can continue spending like the welfare state that we have been for years, but the fact is we can't. It's over.
Right.
It's
absolutely.
Over.
Congresswoman, I want to ask you about something. We're going to be talking to a friend of yours and people who I know you guys know each other, Andrew Breitbart, about this case of NPR and a House vote today, a potential bill that would go to the floor to stop all funding from going to NPR or PBS through the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. I'm guessing you're going to be against this. Tell us your reasoning.
No, I will.
Or for it. I'm sorry, you're going to be for it. You're against funding for NPR and PBS. Sorry.
Yes, I'll be voting for the bill, but there's a Wall Street Journal article out this morning that people may want to take a look at. And in the Wall Street Journal article, it says that it isn't that funding is necessarily cut. It's a different kind of accounting. So money won't be able to go to pay for programming or for NPR to purchase programming from affiliates. They can use the money on administrative overhead. So this is a very different understanding of the bill than what was first told to people. I actually thought they were going to be cut. My opinion is we have so many radio stations and so many TV stations that are held privately. Let's let everybody stand on their own and compete in the marketplace. But this bill doesn't even do that. It merely holds NPR to a different level of accounting standards so they can use their money in administration. They just can't use it for programming. So it really isn't even cutting, unfortunately.
Wow. Okay. Well, so it's somewhat of a half measure, but at the same time, it takes a swipe at them. Obviously, not what the left is saying at this point about it, saying it's going to end all of NPR. I want to hit another piece here from the National Review Online, in which they wrote the following: Michelle Bachmann's opportunity. At this point, I'm wondering why. This is Rich Lowry. At this point, I'm wondering why Michelle Bachmann wouldn't run for president. Bachmann has all upside, getting more national exposure and building a bigger fundraising base. So saying that, you could win at this point. Are you going to run, Congresswoman?
Well, I haven't made that decision, and I think that there's a natural progression when a person would have to decide something on this magnitude, and I think that would be sometime this summer. I have been going to the early primary states to speak to the important people that will be making those decisions in the 4 states, because I truly believe that we cannot have a second term of Barack Obama as President of the United States. Think of Jimmy Carter. If we would have had 2 terms under Jimmy Carter, we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So I am going to talk about the larger issues that we're focusing on, whether it's dealing with Obamacare or this over-the-cliff spending that we're engaged in, or national security concerns. I'm talking about the bigger narrative. And, of course, candidates need to talk and introduce themselves to the voters in those particular areas. But I'm talking about the bigger issues. And if I make a decision, it'll probably be by sometime this summer.
Okay, Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, thank you so much for joining us here.